We are the Specialty Chemicals Industry Conclave in Mumbai. We've been speaking to industry experts, and now we have someone who is a co-head research with PhillipCapital, Naveen Kulkarni. Thank you so much for joining us. They say that it's valued at $25 billion, this sector. It's one of the hottest areas in terms of investment. How do you look at it, Naveen?
Yeah, so we have been covering this space for a while now, and I would say that this is one of the most interesting sectors in India at this point in time. If you look at it, $25 billion is the industry size, but it's a very, very fragmented industry. We have close to 50,000 companies which are working in this space, and not a very large company of the size of, let's say, Reliance, which is working in the specialty chemical space. So there are a lot of small and mid-sized companies which are working in this space. What has happened in the last 3 to 4 years where the sector has actually got re-rated is that the domestic consumption story, of course, has been very, very strong. So that has been driving this space. But a large opportunity is opening up because of the exports market.
Right.
Yeah. So China has been one of the leaders. It has been the leaders in the chemicals and the specialty chemical space, and they have been non-compliant with the pollution norms and other things for a fairly long period. And now the government is starting to clamp down on this space, right? Because of that, a lot of business is actually started to move to India.
Right.
Right. So India's market share in the global space is just around 3–4%. Right. But China has a very large market share. Even a 1% move from China to India, right, will mean a 20% additional business for India. So
in fact, we heard one of the speakers say, Dr. Kai, say that the China growth story might be slowing down, and that is a huge opportunity as far as India is concerned. But what do you think is the biggest challenge? I mean, here as well, it's not going to be very easy to grab that opportunity. Well, China has a mindset of probably focusing on few products and making more in that sector. But the Indian way of doing things is pretty different. How do you see policies like Make in India, for example, impact this sector?
See, policy framework is important in the sense it helps in certain aspect. But at this point in time, if I were to look at the specialty chemical space, it's a lot dependent on the entrepreneur who is running the business. So let's take an example of a company like Aarti Industries. Okay, this company has been one of our favorites for a fairly long period, and the reason for that reason why this company has been favorite is that this has actually focused on one space, which is benzene derivatives, and they have specialized in that space. They are the global leaders in terms of how they do business. They are very, very efficient in terms of capital allocation, and the promoter has the right mindset to develop this space. So my sense is that if you look at it, China is one factor, Make in India is another factor. These are enabling factors. But it's the Indian entrepreneurs who are able to find the right mix of business, right ideas. The opportunity is there. But to be able to tap this opportunity, it's not driven by the entrepreneur, his skill set, his mindset, and also the knack of doing business, discipline in terms of capital allocation. These are the aspects which have been the win-win factors at this point in time.
As an investor, would you think that the Indian entrepreneur really has scale? I mean, that's such an important component of actually building one's own organization in this space. So do you think that the Indian entrepreneur has it in him and her to actually, think of scale and the big picture?
Yeah, so let's look at one industry where Indian entrepreneurs have demonstrated. Let's look at two industries, okay, where Indian entrepreneurs have demonstrated this scale. One is definitely the IT industries, where there has been a scale, right? TCS is close to, let's say, 4.5–5 lakh crore kind of a company, right? So that means they have demonstrated scale in that business. Okay, then the second, again, this is an export-oriented business, right? Because the scale comes from the exports business, right? If we export products to the developed market, that's where the scale comes in. Second industry is the pharmaceutical industry, right? Where there is scale. So pharmaceutical industry is again an industry which is dependent on chemistry, right? This industry, specialty chemicals, by the name itself, it's dependent on chemistry. So in this business also, what are the key ingredients of this business? The key ingredients of this business is chemistry, right? And the services aspect. So China has been able to do well in any product. So any product which has a certain amount of scale in terms of volume, right? Let's say more than 50,000 tons or 100,000 tons or 200,000 tons is some of their benchmarks. If a product has more than 100,000 or 200,000 tons annual sales possible, then they will get into that space, drive down the cost, produce as much quantity as possible, right, and scale up the business. Indian mindset is slightly different. We don't necessarily work in that manner. We essentially would work in spaces where we would pick up a particular chemistry, okay, these set of chemistry, okay, what are the various products which are possible, which can be aligned, provide high quality services. So specialty chemicals by definition is not a product which is essentially based on the chemical composition, but it is essentially based on what kind of performance that product has, right? So for example, let's take a very simple example. So you have a non-stick pan, right? So there is a coating on the non-stick pan, right? It's not what chemical that we are using for that pan, right? That's not the winning proportion. How durable is that? So whether a chemistry or you are able to package a particular product which has that kind of durability and that kind of lasting effect is what is going to be a successful product.
Right.
So if you are able to figure out that chemistry, that I can provide these kind of products, okay, this is where the durability comes in, right? I have a certain chemistry, this product I add, this ingredient I add, so that results in certain, then I provide high quality service to back it up.
Got it. These are components and traits, for example, that make a product attractive to the consumer. The final question that I want to ask you, Naveen, is that what would make a company in this specialty chemical space attractive to the investor? What should a company and an entrepreneur do? What are the tips you would give?
So there are two aspects again. One is whether they have discovered the right set of products and which can be scaled up. Okay, whether there is sufficient opportunity which is available in that space. Okay. The second, which is the larger, the opportunity is difficult for investors many times to gauge. But the second, which is a more critical aspect, which is essentially a thumb rule for any business, is the discipline, is the financial and the capital allocation discipline which a company has. So what has been the investment proportion in the last 5 to 10 years? What has been the cash turnover cycle, right? Cash regeneration cycle. So company invested 100 crores. In what time frame were they able to recover those? And there are enough companies in this space. So for example, let's say Vinity Organics or an Atul Limited or an Aarti Industries. These companies have really made it big in this space. And one of the strongest points is not just their technical capabilities, it's also the financial discipline, right? The frugal nature of the business, right? How the investors have, how the entrepreneurs have been able to scale the business up by generating sufficient cash flows which can be reinvested in the business, right? Which can help them to do acquisitions in the right spaces. These can be very critical factors, right? So investors can gauge things up to a certain point, right? We can gauge the chemistry, but you are not an expert. You are not a chemist, right? Yeah, well, you can't be sitting on the board and telling company that you should do this and should get into that chemistry, because that's something which is very difficult and you may not have the required expertise. But what you can definitely gauge is the business efficiency, right? Which has been there in the last 5 to 10 years. Is there demonstrated history of these aspects? And for that aspect, we have seen quite a few companies which have demonstrated this skill.
I think coming from somebody who's been heading research and has been in this space, it's quite a lot of insights for an entrepreneur in that space. Thank you so much, Naveen, for sharing these pointers with our viewers. Thanks for joining us on this conversation.